Welcome, everybody. Brady from BGWX, and we're back here for another tropical breakdown here of Tropical Storm Melissa and how it relates to the upcoming pattern. Um, it's a dangerous potential storm that is evolving. It certainly has the marks of a Caribbean monster, a Caribbean beast, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So there is Melissa down at the bottom of your screen. You can see it's still slightly, trying to work its way off the end of that front right there with this big system. You can see right here, you see this big old swirl. That's from the rain from a couple days ago. And you can see the tail end of the front. And again, we talked about that moisture has been working over Hispaniola and has been working to produce significant amounts of rainfall down there, and will continue to do so over the next day or two as well, and on its exit as well, I'm guessing. But now the focus turns to, as well, Jamaica, and that is where I think that our as the weather community's biggest concern is right now is that this storm is going to be in close proximity to Jamaica for the majority of this weekend, to be honest, potentially into next week as well. And that's the biggest concern is the storm does not have to make landfall to have devastating impacts to Jamaica. So we'll see how close this gets. Here's what we're watching right now. What we have to keep an eye on is any center reformations, first of all, meaning the center moving to one place or another, which shifts the overall track. Okay, you can see here's our storm right here, and we have to keep an eye on how far north. We're going to see a little bit of a northerly tick, so to say, likely tonight into tomorrow. It's expected, but what we're going to see is this westerly loop. Does it look like this? Do we see one of these, and then eventually comes around Jamaica, or we should use a different color? Or do we see it come here, or do we see it kind of fringe Jamaica and make a landfall, or slide out, or slide early Jamaica landfall? There's still a lot of different scenarios at play here in terms of specifics for the impacts of Jamaica, and so that is the biggest concern that I see right now, because what we talked about, the upper level environment, there's no changes to that, unfortunately. Take a look here at upper air, wind 200. Take a look here. This is an increase. You can see that, or we can just show it. Take a look at the increasing favorable environment that we're going to see here. This edge of the front will continue to get lifted up and away like Mary Poppins. Will be taken out, and this will come in. This will come in and work as, I'm like to calling it, a hurricane dome. And it's basically what's going to help create our hurricane is a favorable upper level pattern for divergence for our hurricane, meaning it's going to help create be able to spin the top faster of our hurricane, meaning it starts from the surface up. This upper level pattern, more favorable, will allow easier to vent this air out of the top of the hurricane and spin the top faster. And that is what we're going to be looking at here with this upper level environment. And as you can note here on the expected here on looking at just using the Euro AI, only going to become more favorable as we head into the weekend as well. Just a very favorable environment for intensification as it sits over this ULAC here. And this weekend, I really think, is the prime time for intensification into early next week. This weekend into early next week is when I would expect the most significant intensification. And then at that point, the attention turns to Cuba. And that is when we have to keep a very close eye on potential major impacts, as at this point, I don't think we're doubting a landfall in Cuba, unfortunately. The question is where at this point. Does it work through the central part, the eastern part of Cuba? That is where that is where I am most concerned with, because not most, equally concerned as with Jamaica, because that could be devastating impacts there. If we're going to be talking about a Category 4 or 5 hurricane that working through there, certainly devastating impacts we would see. And anytime there's a Category 4 or 5 plus hurricane, there's always going to be significant damage, especially to a place with infrastructure like Cuba. That would be a significant concern, no doubt, along with the heavy rainfall and catastrophic flooding we have to be watching across Cuba, Hispaniola, and also Jamaica. So yeah, those were the biggest impacts lie in the short term into this weekend, into early next week. And then from there, here's what we have to keep an eye on here with the track is how close, or not how close necessarily, is where does our trough drop in here and what does it look like? So as you can see, we maybe dip below Jamaica, maybe it comes close approach to Jamaica. We'll see. Yet to be determined here. We'll really start to see a much better organization. Or likely tomorrow into Saturday of this storm, and then this weekend again really see this thing and take off and intensify. And how far is Melissa able to dip westward? Because the more west Melissa's able to get, the more favorable position, it gives it a better chance to get out in front of that trough, so to say. And that is the biggest thing to watch. This is so obviously concerning situation in Cuba. We're watching that. We're going to be watching that closely for our friends down there. But this is what we have to watch here is how does this trough drop in at this point? How does this drop in, and where is Melissa in relation to that trough? Also, how strong is our Atlantic ridge? A stronger Atlantic ridge as well is going to work to push Melissa further west. So that's something to keep an eye on. Models tend to always underestimate the ridge here out in the middle of the Atlantic. Always tends to happen. It's very, very frequent, so I wouldn't be surprised to lean maybe slightly on the western edge, or I would not necessarily western edge, just this being able to tick on the, I guess, western edge, whatever. I wouldn't bet against this thing being able to work its way westward this weekend versus heading out right away. I'll just put it like that. I would lean away from a GFS solution, so to say. That's what I'm trying to say. And again, the matter is then, where's Melissa in relation? Is it able to work so far that we're looking at South Florida impacts? It's not most likely right now, so to say, and I would lean against it, but it's still, that's why it's, look at this 6-7 days out. It's something to monitor. The cone isn't not even going out that far yet. The cone's, barely making its way into Cuba right now. So that is where we have to keep a close eye on, is where does this trough drop in? How deep does this trough? That's, I think, will be bigger than necessarily how far east it is able to get. And now, if it's so far east, then that does play a huge factor, because then maybe Melissa misses its exit, and then we have to wait for the next trough to come in and pick it up, so to say. Or maybe it's so east and Melissa is already heading out that Melissa just pushes out right away. And so this is where we have to start monitoring all these little details in the long range. And that's why it's not worth getting too caught up quite yet. But I just want to throw the thoughts out there for what we can look into. Because if this trough, say, digs a little deeper, and Melissa's able to work its way close enough, so to say, and it gets just enough out in front of the trough, that's when it can get pulled in, and that's when we look at potential impacts for the East Coast. So that is the scenario we're watching. That's not necessarily, I wouldn't say any scenario is most likely right now, in my opinion. Do we see more guidance tending to lean this way? Sure. That's what you see at the moment on all those spaghetti plots. But what do those spaghetti plots look like 48 hours from now? Are they all sending it right here? And then what are you going to say at that point? Like, it's just, so 2 days ago. So that means you're just following exactly what the models are saying. That's not forecasting. That's not just because it has 40 different ensemble members. That does not mean any of those are indicative of the track. Or in fact, if you see the westernly, a third of the model showing a more westernly solution, and maybe that becomes what the westernly solution was. I mean, this was the case with Aaron. I was watching these 2,000 miles away, and then eventually we're looking at tropical storm warnings for the Carolinas. So again, it's not like, again, Aaron wasn't, it wasn't a major impact system, but we did see tropical storm force winds out here on the Outer Banks, and after it was declared that it was going to be 2,000 miles away, 6 days out, 7 days out, whatever. So that's why I don't like the spaghetti plots, so to say, because they skew what may be actually happening in the forecast, and the reality is we don't know yet, because it's going to depend on all about how this drops in, and how there's just unknown factors with such a large system that we're tracking. Regardless, there's going to be impacts from this, potential for severe weather, flooding, strong gusty winds, that typical East Coast storm that we tend to see. That is the concern here. And then the real question is, even if Melissa does not get steered out in front, is there enough interaction between Melissa and the trough? And I'll show you an example. Euro AI kind of does that on this specific run. You see how it kind of gets pinwheeled really more into Nova Scotia, and that would be a concern. So I would say, my friends in Nova Scotia, you should be keeping a close eye on this as well, and especially into Newfoundland, if anyone lives there. But even if we don't get a full pinwheel, so to say, see how it kind of kicks it out before pulling it in, and that avoids any major impacts on this specific run. This is not the end. This is not the end result. But notice what you see here is, look at the enhancement Melissa provides moisture-wise. So we see a significant flash flood threat, and also strong gusty winds likely for much of the East Coast, as well as that pressure gradient starts to increase, as well, and just Melissa itself being injected into the storm. So that is something in terms of impacts, you would have to keep an eye on as well, in terms of how Melissa could impact the U.S., so to say, indirectly, especially. So I would say at this point I'm leaning to at least some indirect impacts. With that storm that we're watching towards Halloween timeframe next week. Again, there's a bunch of different solutions. They don't mean much right now, so it's hard to put really too much stock. You can see there, Melissa misses the trough completely, and it waits for the next trough to kind of basically push it out, so to say. So on that Euro. So there's just a bunch of different individual model runs you're going to see on all of these, and it's not too much of a concern at this moment, to invest yourself too deeply into these. Just got to be patient, let it do its thing. Again, you see the Euro drop the trough a little bit further east, not as much depth on it, forces Melissa further east. In fact, so it speeds up so fastly that it has to wait for the next trough to come and kick it out. And even the trough after that almost has to really do the job of kicking it out. So you can see the complications here, but what you can take away is it's going to be an active pattern for the central and eastern U.S. in terms of weather, and also the Pacific Northwest with continuous storms being dropped in. So this is where we have to watch, for consistent, that weekly storm potential that we're tracking. And then really the question is, in the short term, is can Melissa interact with one of these, and can Melissa get pinwheeled, let's so to say, by the trough we're looking at next week? That's the biggest thing that I'm watching. Again, I wouldn't be too concerned right now for any U.S. impacts, but just monitor. Just watch the forecast. Watch my videos. Maybe not. I would appreciate it. But it's really just a watch situation right now. There's no need to sound any alarms or anything. Just a matter of where exactly we're going to find out where exactly Melissa is going to go in the short term. We're going to let the upper level environment start to figure itself out in the coming days here, and the picture will become a little bit clearer. And we can get a better idea for how things play out, so to say. But in the short term, there's no reason to be panicking right now, at all. In the short term focus, or if you live in the U.S., in the short term, Jamaica should be on very high alert for a strong hurricane, potentially life-threatening impacts between flooding, wind, surge, depending on how exactly. Where exactly Melissa goes. Just be preparing for a hurricane, and the same with Cuba, eastern Cuba, and central. I would all be watching. Basically, cut Cuba in half, and I would say the whole eastern half should be watching very closely. And also Hispaniola, the continuous flood threat will continue here over the next few days. Uh, so that I'm unfortunate, but we could see some significant developments come out of there potentially with the flash flooding that's just going on and on and on and on and on. As you can see, it's going to go on for days still, so it's not ending anytime soon, unfortunately. So that's about all I have to cover here with Melissa tonight. I think there is a lot that we have yet to uncover. I mean, I'm looking at the steering currents here, and it hasn't really revealed itself yet, quite yet, where I think Melissa is heading exactly. I just don't think that has become so all that clear quite yet. If I were to lean anywhere, I would lean west of Jamaica at the moment in terms of track. I think that's where I would favor, but at the same time, or meaning just no landfall immediate with Jamaica on the western approach south of the island. Now maybe when it comes back and hits Jamaica, it's possible on the turn back to the northeast, so to say, like a euro, for example, but like a current euro. But it's hard to say exactly the exact tract of Melissa right now, as we'll start to see. Click here. As we'll start to see itself organize. You can see all that disorganized vorticity. Front starts to displace itself, leave. You can see it becomes completely unattached from the edge there. And at that point, it can take off and let its wings breathe and unfortunately turn into a very, very strong major hurricane likely. All right. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And until next time, peace.